So here we are. We're going to do it. This is the big EOD podcast part 2. I'm excited to talk about this. We're going to run over all of the things that we didn't talk about last week or barely discussed. And of course, there's a really big, dare I say, controversy going on in the Guild Wars 2 community right now about the Dragon's End meta event. Since last week, we had the opportunity to do it ourselves, formulate our own opinions. I know that you guys are talking about it. You're passionate about it. You're arguing about it. I've seen so many things, even in our Discord, in the Coffee Break channel. If you guys haven't checked that out, that's where all of the dialogue goes on. There's been days and days of debate about this. It's definitely triggering a lot of people to sort of drum up, I think, the divide that has always existed between casual and hardcore players in Guild Wars 2. It's a fascinating discussion. It's definitely brought it to the surface. So I am looking forward to talking about this with my awesome team of Coffee Break co-hosts. There we go. So again, the format is pretty simple. We're just going to be discussing all of this stuff, talking back and forth with each other. Junie's going to keep a close eye on the chat. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, you want to throw things virtually at one of us, please go ahead and type in the chat. It keeps things very interesting, much more fun. We'll try to respond to what you say. And if we didn't get to what you said on the way, there will be a Q&A at the end. All right, so what do you guys want to start with? You want to run right into the meta event controversy, or do you want to touch on some of the other things that we didn't get too deep into last week?
I was going to say that we could touch on a bit of the story, but I think we should save that for the end because that'll be like a spoiler thing. So,
okay.
Yeah, maybe let's just get straight into the controversy because I think we're going to burn time away talking about that pretty quickly.
It could be the entire podcast.
It could be. It may end up being.
It might. So let me just give a quick rundown for those of you guys who don't know. In case you don't know, I would be shocked if you don't, but there is a giant controversy in the realm of Guild Wars 2 today, or this week, since the Dragon's End meta has come out. So there are two really divided camps. The truth is that the turtle mount, the new mount that came out with Guild Wars 2, is in fact locked behind the meta, the final meta of the last zone of the expansion. Now this has got this had some people excited, some people trepidatious. I was excited because I didn't really like the collections for, say, the Sky Scale. It was really arduous for me to do. I was really looking forward to something like this. But the meta event is hard. It is actually difficult. It requires a huge amount of coordination, collaboration, interaction, involvement, skill use, right? DPS checks, boons, heals, and then, of course, CC. Now, we talked a little bit about this last week in regards to this expansion's new bend on trying to sort of re-incentivize the use of things like CC and combo fields, teach them and include them, use them, require them, etc. But this is obviously forming some difficulty in being able to complete the meta and get the turtle. Now that's really causing a lot of people a lot of frustration. There's two drastic camps. I'm gonna probably talk a little bit about the Muckluck video that he posted earlier this week that hosted a debate in chat between him on stream and Mighty Teapot and Isa and Illusion, basically representing two camps of like, I think Muckluck was trying to balance it, saying there were two camps of people that are like, it needs to be nerfed, I want it to be easier, and then some other people saying, no, it doesn't, get good, we just need you to be better. And so there's two really strong opinions going in about this. So we'll explore what our opinions are, how we think we should fix it or how it could be fixed, what Arenanet is doing specifically that we already know that they're going to be doing, and how that's going to change things going forward. So let's start with you, Cryptic. What are your thoughts?
Before we dive into that, I think you need to turn me up. People are saying I was super quiet.
I did turn you up a bit. Is he? Okay, right. Cryptic, project, anyway. Speak with enthusiasm.
Yes. I obviously, first off, I just want to get this off the bat. I have to say, I am not in the camp of the meta should be nerfed. I probably have the most, I know. I probably have the most, maybe not nuanced, but like middle ground opinion. Because my statement has a lot of caveats. Those caveats are the meta should not be nerfed if X, Y, and Z happened.
Okay.
The meta, obviously, overall, the final boss, fantastic fight. I actually really enjoy it. I think that The final boss fight was
Amazing.
enjoyable. I liked most of the mechanics except for one that I'll get into. And I think the coordination it requires is beneficial for the game, and it was enjoyable. It was, it reminded me of Dragon Stand, that kind of stuff. Triple Trouble, even Tequato before Tequato didn't really get nerfed. What they did was when they changed Tequato so that it had so that it was way harder. They basically made it harder. Not too long after that, they did a change to the way Condis worked so they could stack over a certain amount, and that inherently made it easier to do Tequato.
You guys remember that? Back when Condis, each individual Condi only stacked to, what was it, 20, 25? I think it was 25.
25, yeah.
Yeah, 25 maximum bleed stacks, 25 maximum, I was going to say torment, but that didn't exist. But any individual Condi could only stack to 25, so if you had more than one Condi in a group, they were being wasted. It's crazy.
Stacks. But yes, it reminded me of times doing those meta, those open world events, those metas. Personally, though, I think overall this meta, I'm not sure what Arenanet's goal was with this meta. My assumption was they wanted to not only end End of Dragons with a bang, but also to kind of ramp up the difficulty. And we've seen them do this before with other expansions. And everybody knows, Heart of Thorns is the big one that everybody remembers. The difficulty did ramp up. Like, we got a shock
immediately
system.
Giant step from the moment that you walked in the first zone. You were getting your butt kicked by NPCs in a way that no one had before. It was shocking.
Yes. And I think that their goal was something. Pocket Raptors. I think their goal was something similar with this expansion. And Teapot actually put out a video this morning where he was, or maybe not this morning, maybe it was earlier, but Teapot put out a video where he was showing how he perceived the difficulty scaling to be. And he had raids at the top and then strikes, and then there's this gap, and he's like, the Dragons and meta fills that gap. And I tend to agree with that. I just think the issue comes into play with the execution. Where we get the divide in the community is the execution, the way Arenanet executed, putting in this harder end game content, this meta event that most people do a meta event, they expect it to be a casual, laid back experience. And this meta event was set up in a way that you were funneled there, right? You needed it for the turtle mount, which obviously I think we can all, to get that discussion out of the way right now, we can all agree the turtle mount should not have been locked behind the meta event, right? That should not have been the only way to get it.
Yeah. No? Okay. So let's. No. Well, no. Hold on. I agree that we should probably break this down into different sub discussions.
Hit this man.
Hold on. And let's start with the turtle, right? Because I think one of the biggest arguments, in fact, I don't want to put any words in Mukluk's mouth, but if I could boil his argument down, I think it all sort of stands on that subject, right? This is too hard. I want the turtle. People want the turtle. The item that's on the box, right? The selling point for the expansion. One of the big selling points for the expansion is being locked behind the completion of very challenging content. Yeah, from that perspective, I think absolutely that's true. I think now that we've seen what has happened, for me, I think that is one of the big solutions. And correct me if I'm wrong, they're doing that.
Yes, the 15th, it's going to be patched, which is a Tuesday, I believe.
Right, so next big patch day, they're going to be removing that. So just so you guys know, that is the plan. The turtle mount required the successful completion of the meta event, and that is no longer going to be the case. I think that fundamentally changes this entire argument. I think now that that is done, my perspective on how this should be handled is shifted dramatically because we know that that's going to be true. Going into it, I was excited. This was an open world meta experience, something that was going to be the big grand finale of the expansion, much like it was. It's funny because I don't feel like that was true in POF, but it definitely was in HOT, right? The culmination of the big experience of the expansion came together for Dragon Stand, and it was really epic. Not only was it really epic, the rewards were good, repeatable. Every time you made a legendary, you got to go through Dragon Stand, right? Crystalline ores used for all these different things, re-incentivizing you to go back. It was challenging and maybe arduous, right? But there was a reason why you were being funneled in there. No, why is there people? Yes, I should keep the mustache, says the poll. Come on. Who is swaying these? Okay, anyway. So for me, I was looking forward to being able to do the mount by leaving the aerodrome and getting to experience the big meta. In fact, let me say that if I was in the drawing room for creating this expansion, and they were like, let's come up with a new way to give the players the new mount, right? Let's come up with this new thing. Let's make a meta event that is unlike the other meta events. This is a side meta event that's very challenging and fun, and then you're going to get the thing behind that. I would have said it was a good idea. Now, I probably would have been wrong, because we see how this works out in the community. It was really, it's really problematic for people getting the turtle mount. But I would have said, I don't blame them for doing it, but I can see now that it probably wasn't great. So initially I was against it being removed from the meta. Having done the meta, seeing how it's panning out for people, and seeing that is the crux of the argument for one side, because we'll get into it more, but I really think that's the bottleneck there. That's the real crux about like wanting to have it nerfed. I think the better way to do it is to remove the turtle from the event and then not nerf the event. That's where I stand.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get more into this. I feel like the turtle is definitely the coup de grace, like the icing on the cake for people in the argument, because I think that there has not really been a counter argument to that, so that's why people like to slam that down, right? Like, the turtle's behind it.
Yeah.
There's like, what do you say to that? You just say, well, too bad for you. Like, you can't say anything that's positive to that argument. And the only response that I can think of that I feel like is appropriate to the turtle being locked behind the meta event is that if that's the direction Arenanet wanted to take, which is to push the game to push people to have a better understanding of the game, and we may get into this later, we may get into this now, they should have set it up so that the meta event, all the mechanics in the meta were in the story throughout, right? So the Wisp phase, first episode of the story spoiler, very minor spoiler. If you haven't played this, I don't know what you're doing. When you first start the story, you are on these pirate ships. And Aurene gives you this ability to jump from pirate ship to pirate ship. Yeah,
with her power.
Why the Wisp also comes from Aurene. It's her power as well. So it already matches lore wise. Why did they have to come up with a separate power for the pirate ship for the Atherblades story step? Instead of doing it, we could have just had the Wisp thing right there, and people would have understood how it works. They would have had to change it, obviously. It couldn't have just copy and pasted. They would have had to change how that whole story step worked as far as going from ship to ship. But they could have had that in there, and then people would have understood, oh, this is how the Wisp mechanic works, instead of basically turning into a Wisp and getting a whole new hotbar and having to figure out on the fly how this works and how you get back to the platform. Meanwhile, every second you're not at the platform, your group cannot DPS the boss. You are costing your team time.
Okay, so let's, in order to attack that, I feel like we need to assume, or at least as a collective group, discuss the fact that Arenanet is doing this intentionally. I think your argument just then was taking that as a given, and I'm willing to accept that's
not a given.
Arenanet.
I was suggesting that as a hypothetical. Like, let's just set that up as the construct because that's the only argument to me that holds water for putting the turtle. If we're going to discuss the turtle mount staying locked behind the meta event, then the only argument that makes the only world that makes sense in is that the intention of Arenanet was to make this harder to funnel people to this meta event and make it a more challenging content. And if that's the case, then they had to have set it up better, in my opinion, going forward, right? Or in setting it up.
Yeah, and that it would make sense, right? If Arenanet was doing this on purpose, that's why I'm willing to accept that that's true, because from what I've heard from people discussing this in our channel and people sort of like just in passing having conversations about it, it seems to me like the inside scoop is that Arenanet is more aware rather than less aware. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they know the direction that the game has been going. They know the push and pull. They know that there's a lot of people that would like more challenge. And they've capitalized on that in certain things, right? Strike missions now, and of course, high-end fractals and raids, they demand a lot. They know what they're doing with the combat system, with the expectation of it. They can ramp up the difficulty if they want to. So I'm going to give them the credit of they decided they would like this to be more challenging. They would like more expectation on the individual player to go through even open world meta events, right? They're trying to ramp this up. And we can even without this sort of insider knowledge stuff, we can also kind of assume that that's true just by the reintroduction of these base mechanics, right? They did a little bit of it. I think the overall discussion that I've had with people is that they feel like it wasn't enough. But the very first thing that happens when you walk into this expansion is that they reteach you what CC is, what dodging is, how combo fields work, right? Like they're basically trying to reintroduce these mechanics. Then they also updated the tooltips to now show break bar damage. Now I think it's a little spotty. I don't think they have everything on there, especially some of the soft CC is left out. But some of the bigger, heavier CC skills, not only are they now included with the number of break bar damage that they do, but they're highlighted in green. Like they're like, hey, pay attention to this. But it may not be enough. So I'm assuming that your point is that it's good that they made a meta that has more demand of these things, but they should have ramped up the expectation for the demand in ways that is unavoidable. So like story mode missions, individual things, seeing more requirement for the use of CC along the way.
Exactly. And like, it's not fair for Arenanet to make the boss fights in the story require you to do 35k on a golem, or whatever, That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that just what you said, that instead of just having at the beginning here in the story where they teach you a bit about CC, a bit about combo fields, there's nowhere else in the story after that you are expected to CC or do a combo field. They could have in one of the boss fights. I won't say the names of the bosses, but in any one of the main boss fights throughout the story, there's a couple of them. They could have had it so that the boss gets a bubble and they're invulnerable until you break a big defiance bar. So you understand you have to bring CC. Not an impossible one to break, not something that you have to fill up all your hot bar with CC skills, but one that would, as they're looking through the classes, they say, okay, every class can bring this amount of CC relatively.
Hey, Veronica.
And then people have to use their CC in order to break the bar, and then they understand because they can't continue, they can't kill the boss without doing that. And then you could have one where they have to do a combo field, and it can be a combo field provided by one of your AI companions, one of the NPCs in the story.
The combo field, that is what they did, right? They made it so you had to do combo fields a couple of times, and there was an achievement for not having the field dropped. You had to do a combo finisher a couple of times in the story, but there was an achievement for using your own combo field for the finisher instead of having the NPC do it.
But wasn't that just in the first map?
Yes. I think there were two different instances where it was needed, and both of them were at the beginning. So yeah.
Yeah. So I would have liked it. I would have liked to see these things throughout the story. I mean, if they again, giving them the benefit of the doubt that this was their intention. If this was their intention, then they should have set this up better going throughout. They should have made this a point of emphasis through every step of the story that these are the things that you're going to be facing, and start implementing the mechanics. I'm trying to think of another. The wave mechanic could have been in in some of the story steps. I'm thinking of the reactor particularly. I think that could have been interesting. They could have done something there with that. Do
you think that's one that people should feel already used to because of things like Tequatl, for example, that use a wave mechanic?
So we had a discussion about this in the Coffee Break channel. Someone brought up an interesting point about, I can find their name in a second, but brought up an interesting point about how he feels like people should be expected to, if they see red, stand out of red, like fire, right? You see fire, get out of fire in WoW raids, right?
Yeah.
But that meme exists because people are not expected. I mean, they may be expected, but they are not trained yet to do that. They have to get used to it. And Guild Wars 2, more than any other MMO, does not train you it doesn't punish you for standing in red throughout open world. So it's completely, to me, it makes complete sense, absolute complete sense for someone to have played through all of Guild Wars, all the expansions, all the story, all the open world stuff. And maybe just, maybe they didn't do Triple Trouble. Maybe they didn't do Tequatl or whatever. They just missed a few things. They're just playing casually. And for them to have completely not understood that standing in red can be very punishing. They think, oh, if I stand in this red, it's not that they don't know that it's bad. It's that, oh, this is just going to do 5,000 damage to me or something. This isn't going to be something that I should be dodging or avoiding every one of these. We know from raids.
Well, and especially if you're not actually running a full DPS build, which I think a lot of open world people are in that boat, right? A lot of those people are running Marauders or maybe even soldiers or something more defensive. They're sort of used to being able to tank mechanics rather than avoid them.
Exactly. And, the only reason it's, intuitive to us, and this kind of leads more into the divide that we'll be probably talking about in a few. The only reason it's intuitive to us is that, we do raids, we do fractals, we do strikes. And in the higher end versions of those, you get punished extremely hard for, if you stand in something, it'll just kill you, right? Like, any boss mechanic in any of the raids pretty much will just kill you if you're not avoiding the ones you need to avoid.
Or at the very least is a DPS loss.
Yes, at the very least, yes.
At the very least, you don't want to go down. If you go down, you lose DPS. If you're a power build, you lose scholar uptime. Okay, so we are actively trying to avoid taking unnecessary damage. So that's true. So
but I don't think the community. I don't think the community as a whole has gotten to the point where this is the norm for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's Arenanet's job. If they truly intended this, again, we're giving them we're in this scenario, we're assuming that they intended this. It's their job to have set this up better. And I feel that's really the big failure. And that's the conversation people aren't having. We have this divide where people are arguing to nerf it or not to nerf it. But I feel like I'm surprised that more of this, frustration isn't pointed at Arenanet. If this is how they set it up and they intended it, why are we not more,
couldn't we participate in the possibility that this meta event was in essence trying to serve that purpose? That this meta event, like we're treating it like it's the big end and that's it, and there's never going to be anything else. So like by this point, everything needed to be trained, but maybe this is the gate. Because people are going to be forced to learn it through this experience. And I feel like they will, whether or not the growing pains are terrible, whether or not it divides the community. And if Muckluck's point was that we're going to lose players on it, I mean, it's possible, right? And that's all valid, but it at least should be, entertained that this is going to serve that purpose. There's going to be growing pains here, but people are learning it and hating it. And I think, Angie, I wanted to talk about what you said earlier. You mentioned that if you take away the turtle and put better rewards in that are alternate to the turtle, people are just going to change their complaints from the turtle to the mats. And that's true. People are going to complain no matter what. I think the Guild Wars 2 community is an amazing community, but we do complain a lot, and Arenanet listens. And so things get changed a lot based on those complaints, and not always for the better, in my personal opinion. But one of the things that I think Cryptic's right. I think that there should be throughout the entire game, really, more expectation of this, so that we don't. Because I mean, even let's take the meta out, right? Let's remove the meta from this discussion at all. From those of us who raid and do strikes and do raid trainings, it was shocking. I mean, I'll just say for me, it was absolutely shocking when I was doing raid trainings. The amount of people who have been playing this game for years, who had leveled up to max level, who had built raid builds, who had gotten the gear and had walked into raid training the first day and had to be taught what CC was. I mean, that's real. That's a thing. Like, there's obviously a need for this to be introduced better, expected more of you throughout the game. So even without this meta, I think most of us have felt like it's kind of shocking. I do want to say that doing the meta, and especially doing the strike of the meta, the fourth strike, has a lot of throwbacks to previous mechanics that we should all know. Like I was getting hit by those giants in Ore. Those they do like the slams and the big AoEs and the stuff, like you can recognize that, or the snipers from Dragonstand, right, in HOT. Like a lot of those mechanics are there. So they did bring up things that were from the past, but I agree that there should be a lead up to it, and they should have done that, but I don't think that because they didn't, the solution should be to nerf the end battle. So like, Cryptic, would you say that, yeah, they should do these things more, and I think we both agree that would be have been a better way to do it. But since that's unlikely that they're going to do that, do you think the solution now should be to nerf it, or to allow people the time to wait to hope that this event serves the purpose of causing people to learn these mechanics?
See, personally, I don't want it to be nerfed. I'd rather it stay at the difficulty that it maybe currently is. I know it's already been tweaked a little bit. At least the difficulty that I did it at, I did it a couple days ago. And at that point, I think it had only received, the tail hadn't been nerfed, but it had received the tweaks to the green mechanic so that people could not cheese it. And that I believe people could also not hold it up they reduced the time. So for anyone who doesn't know, there's a mechanic where you stand in greens and a person that's standing in those greens will get multiple people, I should say, will get randomly selected and will get turned into wisps. This is the wisp mechanic, and they will have to then collect. They will have to climb back up to the platform, and they use their jump, their space bar, to ascend, to float up, and they have to collect these orbs to refill their endurance, and the endurance is used as you float up. You could, what people were doing was they were just not standing in the greens. And if you don't stand in the greens, everyone dies. If there's no one in there, everyone dies. And you just respawn on the airship and glide back in. They stopped that.
This is where coordination comes in, not DPS requirement or CC requirement, but actual like dedicating people to do this. Not too many, not too few, right?
I feel like that was a bit of a cheese, so I'm glad that you can't do that anymore. And then now, or something else that was happening, and I believe they fixed this as well, is one person cannot stand in the green and hold up the entire event. Like there was a... oh no, that got fixed with the no more GGing thing. But you can't die to skip it. But they also reduced the time. They reduced the time that you hold up the group, because anyone that it only takes one person not making it up, still climbing, trying to get back to the top of the platform. And if they're not there, the boss is invulnerable. You can't do damage to there's no way to do damage. So you're losing time. And before, I think it was 120 seconds. You could lose. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone. I think now it's down to 75. Which is a massive, you add that up over it, you get at least 3 of those phases. It depends on how much DPS you have, but you get the 2-3 of those phases during the fight, where you have to do the wisp mechanic. That's several minutes of the fight that you're going to lose if somebody doesn't make it back. And those changes I think are good and healthy for the meta. What I don't think it should be nerfed. I didn't like the tail change. I think that if it's here already, it is coming soon. It'll be here on the 15th. And
I thought it was here already. Is that
okay? So
am I
it
wrong
may be
about
here
that?
already. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you may be right about that. I think what I heard was that there was some confusion about whether they were able to do it without patching or not. If they were able to do it without patching, then it's definitely here already. And again, for anyone who doesn't know, the tail, the boss gets massive damage reduction when the tail is available to attack. And so you have to kill the tail first, otherwise you're really not doing any damage to the boss.
And I'll tell you, in the 2 attempts that I've done on it, and I have not succeeded, I've done 2 attempts. I didn't join any Discord. I didn't coordinate it myself. I didn't request anyone come and join me. I was just a regular pug in a loosely coordinated group. We failed twice. And both times, I would say that the DPS stack ignored the tail. Whenever the tail came up onto the platform. And it was definitely at that point a huge DPS check that we were not able to meet.
Yeah, and I don't want the meta, perhaps the meta would end up needing to be nerfed. I don't want to say that it doesn't need to be nerfed, because I don't think we would have known that for several weeks, right? I think we're both in agreement, and my argument is that, okay, if Arenanet isn't going to lay this out so that, people are better prepared for this through the story, I would at least like a few weeks to see where we stand, 4 or 5 weeks to see where it stands in the meta before we end up nerfing it. That doesn't mean I don't want small changes, though. We talked about some of the changes that happened already that I already liked. Yeah. I think that some changes other changes that should also be made are, I don't like the stacking buff mechanic. I think what it does is it incentivizes a lot of standing around and doing nothing. And then when events spawn, literally running from an event to an event, all the way across the map. It doesn't feel structured. It doesn't feel contained. It feels like like your hair's on fire or whatever, and you're just running from place to place to place.
You mean unlike Dragon's Den, which separates you into intentional lanes, right?
Yes.
So that because you could still have commanders split up groups to be, tackling certain events, and there's structure there, but the game itself provides the structure in Dragon's Den, right? Based on the lanes. So that's a little bit of a different feeling.
And here there's no structure. I mean, there is a little bit. There is a lane phase. There are 3 lanes and there's a lane phase, but it is short. It really has. It really is just a lead up to the final boss, and it doesn't really serve any other purpose other than that lead up. Everything else that's happening before that lane phase is really just chaos to me. It is people standing still doing nothing if they have the 10 stacks. And if they don't have the 10 stacks, they are running all around the map trying to just find an event that is spawned, do that event, and then find another one.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Because like I said, there was no coordination in my group. I was just running around trying to see as much of the event as I could, just doing all the different things.
Well, I was in a relatively coordinated. I wasn't in Discord or anything, but I was in a relatively coordinated group, and there was no coordination at that point either. It was just pure chaos. And so I was either bored out of my mind when I had the 10 stacks, or I was running around like crazy. And I feel like that dichotomy is annoying, frustrating. It's frustrating and you spend over an hour doing that, right? You spend over an hour.
So that is the next thing I want to talk about with this event, right? So like, I actually believe that if you remove the turtle, which I think that we all agree that they should do, so that actually that releases a lot of the argument against the event itself.
Well, that was what I was going to mention. Just taking the turtle out, doesn't that turn this into, what's that event in Vabi, the domain of Vabi?
Oh, Domain of Istan? Or no, Serpent's Ire.
You mean Serpent's Ire.
Yes.
Serpent's
okay,
Ire.
So that's another event that is obnoxious, right?
Very challenging. Rarely done. Rarely successful, I should say.
Rarely successful, and nobody really complained all that much about that, because like you could put hard content in the game without having. It's true. In my opinion, at least, I think the turtle is what kind of brought it to the forefront, because it was something that everybody expected to get relatively easily.
Yeah, so a couple of things about that. One is that I love what Cryptic said about waiting a couple of weeks. First of all, if I could just say this to both camps, all camps, chill out, guys. The game's been out for like a few days. Like, this is crazy. The amount of like enmity and frustration and expectation. Yes, obviously the expansion didn't last as long as everyone wanted to. Everyone got to the end, enjoyed it. Everyone that I've talked to really likes the expansion as a whole. But like the demand for immediate change before people get used to it, I think that's a little premature. Obviously, we saw this happen before. When HOT came out, no one could kill the Chalk Garant. Nobody could do it. It was incredibly hard. The level of coordination was insane. People were getting used to it. The requirements, the DPS, the organization, none of that was there. It was a couple of months before people could get any kind of kill on that. And that gated certain things. There were collections that you needed to kill the Chalk Garant for. The same thing is true with Serpent's Ire, maybe even worse. In fact, they did, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they did nerf Serpent's Ire or fix it. I think there was like some issues with it. But like getting that done was almost impossible. And it is also a gate for certain collections, right? So like it's not a mount, it's not a turtle, but you had to do Serpent's Ire to get, what were we stuck?
It's the
backpack, dude.
Mark Y Golem.
Yeah, the Mark Y Golem.
And for the
drove
record,
me nuts.
For the record, pretty much every event that people use as an example of a difficult event that Arenanet has put in that has been now, conquered or is accessible to everyone has been nerfed in some respect. I think Triple Trouble is the only one.
I was just going to say Triple Trouble. Yeah.
But
which is why it's a fan favorite for a lot of people.
True. But Taquato was nerfed inadvertently, which, by the way, Triple Trouble still requires you to be coordinated. You still have to basically put together
huge coordination
like you would a raid. But Taquato was nerfed inadvertently, and all the other ones were nerfed directly in some way. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, but I'm pretty sure Chalk Garant, Dragon Stand, Serpent's Ire, all the ones that people point to as this was difficult when it came out, it was actually nerfed at some point. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just want to make that point clear for people going forward. I feel like that gets lost in the argument.
First of all, hi Sassy Cat. The Sassy just said that they're like they nerfed or they buffed tech to like compensate for the the power creep, and then they nerfed it again because it was too much. And so there's always going to be a little bit of wiggle room. I just think that within 4 days of the expansion release is not enough time to make that determination. Otherwise, we're going to do more of that up and down editing that has to be done, and it might land in a place where they're just going to leave it in a way that's not going to be positive. I'm protective of it. I feel like a lot of the difference, the dichotomy between the perspectives, has so much of it is done because the attitude is bad. I don't think it should ever be get good, you're bad, just stop sucking. I don't think that should ever be an attitude. I also don't think that people say, oh, the raiders that we don't care about, this game isn't for them. You know, the open world shouldn't be for them. This, in a way, I was very excited about because it brought the two disparate parties together. I don't leave the aerodrome very often, right? This is a rare thing. I left the Aerodrome. I left the Aerodrome to do this event, and I loved it. This was something that, to me, before I felt like the frustration on both sides, and I knew about all the drama. Before all of that, and Andishan, what's up, buddy, is right, by the way. A lot of games are just filled with drama these days. Before I knew any of that drama, I was just like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like super excited about the fact that there was this new event that had me wanting to go and actually like try and challenge myself and enjoy myself doing this open world event. I felt like that is the first step towards sort of bringing people together, right? Like I would like people to learn the mechanics. I would like them to learn CC. I would like them to be able to learn these kinds of things so that they can, not just so that we can leave it alone and not nerf it and that I selfishly can get the event that I want. I also feel like it's good for the overall health of the game. I think that it will open doors for people to be able to do things like strikes and fractals and raids, things that we're always trying to help people to enjoy because we enjoy it. I think like the goal is a good one. I think that we should be trying to help people to do that. But I do think that there's growing pain that happens every time something like this happens. And whether they nerfed it or not, I mean, a lot of it is players getting accustomed to something new. And I just think that 1 week's time is kind of a crazy expectation to have it be nerfed in that kind of way. But I am really glad that they're removing the turtle from it. I don't want anyone to feel like, you know, I was watching the Muckluck video, right? And I was reading some of the chat and people were like, I only get to play 1 or 2 hours a day. I'm never going to get to do this. First of all, it's super long, right? Like they know that they can never do Dragon Stand or something, but that's okay. But they really wanted this mount. It was advertised for the expansion. They're only going to get to play for 1 or 2 hours. They're never going to get this mount. I understand that concern. I really feel like that is a really big element to that argument. I don't want people to not be able to get something that they feel like is very important to the game's identity and to their experience playing the game, which is mounts, right? I think that's really fair. So I think they should give that to them. And then maybe we can change the perspective or the attitude in how we approach trying to make this more doable for people without being really overtly negative.
No, that's a really good point. And like Pink had mentioned before in the chat, how, you know, as long as you give some decent rewards for this meta, it will encourage higher skilled players to help like lower skilled players achieve this. And you take sort of the essence of the game's advertisement, which is the turtle and fishing, out of the meta. And then it could be a great opportunity. And that opportunity, like you touched upon, to kind of meld these two groups just a little bit in a positive way. And I think that also is based on the player base. The player base has to figure out a way to communicate nicely together and not make people feel bad, and also not like,
the us versus them thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I mean, like you were saying, imagine if fishing was gated behind the meta, Ginny.
Oh, I'd be so upset.
Would you? I mean, that's a fair question. You would be really upset?
Well, I would have been annoyed that it took so long to get to that portion of the content. Like, I'm glad that fishing was available right from the get-go. Like, it would have actually been enjoyable to have the turtle from the get-go so that I could have enjoyed that as I went through the expansion. I feel like I've just kind of had to go through the story to get to the point where then I can start like doing kind of the other stuff, at least when it comes to the turtle. And it would have been the fishing if that had been gated behind.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised.
Granny is right. New is hard. Anything new is hard. So that's true. Also, hi, Granny. And I don't want to skip out on what was mentioned earlier because this is a very important topic that Cryptic and I have debated a lot about. And finally, there's some corroboration in the chat. Yes, Cryptic has an accent. I'm telling Cryptic all the time that he has an accent and he doesn't believe me. But somebody in this chat, Andishan, I think, said you had a nice accent. So, ha! That was very important. We had to take a break. There needed to be a moment to address that.
Oh, also, since we're addressing really important things now, I need to address something that NG mentioned in the chat, that in Lion's Arch, there are a lot of missing persons posters for Marek's character made by worried Aerodrome NPCs.
Oh my goodness. Yes, yeah. There's no Marek on top of boxes in the Aerodrome.
I
what
guess
to do?
I'll take this time to address. Phoenix said that the whirlpools need to be nerfed at the CC bar in the meta event as well. I agree with that. If you get stuck in a whirlpool, you're basically dead. You were better off dying before you got in the whirlpool, because once you're in there, you're stuck in there, and there's not enough CC. A very coordinated group could do it, but there's not enough CC for just even your slightly above average group to break people out of there. There's more important things for them to be doing.
Yeah, that was actually one of the only direct raid calls made in the group that I was in. They said if you're in a whirlpool and that happens, just die. Nobody res. Nobody try to help. Nobody try to CC. It's not worth it. That was one of the things that was said.
Which feels really bad, right?
It does. It feels bad. That's true.
Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to address what you said a second ago about this being a really good opportunity for the community. This is another reason why I put a lot of this blame on Arenanet, because I feel like the lead up was a failure on their part, but I feel like another failure on their part is now that they are nerfing this so quickly, is that they are not giving the community a chance to solve this on their own. I don't mean to solve the meta event. I mean solve the divide that is. Obviously, we knew it was there forever. We've always known, but that now everybody is aware of, right?
Do you trust the community to be able to do that personally? Just out of curiosity, I don't mean to infer one way or the other, but do you believe that that's possible?
It's hard to answer that. I think it's possible. I definitely think
Anything's
it's possible.
possible.
I think there's people out there.
Anything could happen.
I think there's definitely people out there in the community who can achieve this. We just have, but you'll never know unless you wait. And isn't that the whole point? Like, they have to give you a little time. They have to give the community a little time. There's no reason to change this so quickly. You have to give people some patience, to let people figure things out.
Oh my gosh, we have a new Ko-fi subscriber from Dalindra. I'm so sorry. That's very exciting. Dalindra, you rule. Thank you.
You're awesome.
That was the name of the person that was that contributed in the coffee break discussion.
Yes. Earlier. Thank you for contributing, Dalindra.
Yes.
We love it when people do this. The discussions we had in the last couple of days were really interesting. So there's a lot going on. We can see how passionate the community is about this, which is why I was curious about whether or not it's possible to bridge this divide. Even people like all the people that we've been seeing discussing it, right? We were talking about Muckluck, Teapot, Isa, the WIN members. I think everyone there represents a community of people who are raiders, at least people that do raid, right? So like that's even there, I've seen like a difficult time coming together.
Yeah, whether it was possible or not is, something that will always be up for debate. And the reason that I'm so frustrated at Arenanet is because they took that chance away from us. Like Junie said, you wouldn't know until we've tried, right? Yeah. And Arenanet has now taken that chance away from us. They are the parent. I'll use the example I gave in some other discussion I was in. Arenanet is the parent that is now breaking up two siblings fighting, right? Like me and Merrick were fighting, and their parents came in and said, no more fighting. And you will never know how they would have resolved that on their own. And it's not always, obviously as a parent, you don't want your kids to fight, but it's not always the right decision to interrupt that. Sometimes you want to let conflict resolution happen on its own. It's a growth experience. And I think that if Arenanet really does want to start putting more hardcore content in the game, more difficult content, this is something that has to be addressed. This has to be. You cannot leave this community divide continuing to exist. And by removing this opportunity, they have damaged forevermore any more content that they will put in. This will again, this is going to continue to keep happening.
I think it's a fascinating. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I think it's just a fascinating. It's a fascinating dynamic in Guild Wars 2, period, right? Like a lot of the people that we're talking to here in chat, you guys are all awesome. We're all Guild Wars 2 players. Like we're sort of used to this, but the actual gap of divide between people who play one way and do raiding and that kind of thing, and then the people who play casually and have nothing to do with that is so much bigger in this game than in any other MMO. It really is a fascinating, and Guild Wars 2, maybe it's not Guild Wars 2 specific, but it is definitely Guild Wars 2 emphasized. It's much bigger of an issue here than in any other game that I've ever played. And it's because there's always been this big gap between the people who choose to do this content and the people who know that they don't need to and don't decide to, right? Like in every other game, it always comes down to this, is like the way that itemization and vertical progression work in Guild Wars 2. It's not incentivized. You don't need to do this harder content in order to experience the best the game has to offer. You can get the best gear and the best look, the best fashion, the best convenience from not having to do any of this stuff. So a lot of people just don't. So there's this sort of us and them. There's the raid community or the try-hard community. I hate calling it that, actually, because I don't think that's indicative of like the group itself. There are people that just get something different from challenging themselves or gauging their own ability and trying to improve. And then the people that are looking for a very relaxing experience playing the game. Muckluck really delved into that. I think that's really true. I think there's a lot of people who play this game who just want to kind of go through the world exploring and pressing 1. And Guild Wars 2 has thus far enabled people to have a great experience in this game doing that. And this might feel like the first time that there was something gated behind raids. It's not a raid, but gated behind
it feels like
challenging
a raid, right?
content. This might be the very first time that's happened. Do you want legendary armor? It doesn't have to come. Like, legendary armor, first of all, is not tangibly better than ascended armor. And ascended armor can be crafted. So for somebody who doesn't want to do any of that, they've never been forced to. This might be the only time where that's been the case, and I think that's the motivator behind this divide. But I really would like, however this ends up landing with the meta event itself, I would love it to serve as some kind of bridge between the disparate communities, right? Because that's what we do all the time. Like Junie and I and Cryptic, like we've played this game, we've done training raids. It has been, if any of you guys who know our channel, like that's what we've always tried to do. We've tried to welcome non-raiders, more casual players into the raid scene, into the end game, and try to make it a non-toxic, friendly, and open experience. I feel like this is an opportunity to do that on a much bigger scale if it was handled well. I just hate the get good mentality from one side, or the toxic try hard, mentality for the other side. You can't label people like that. I really think that this could be a better opportunity to bring people together.
Yeah, and let me be clear, that does not, like, neither one of those arguments are solutions. They're not. I wouldn't even call them real arguments, right? That is using either your experience or your experience of the way you play the game to define how you want someone else to play it, and not actually laying out points for the reasons why they should be playing this. We as a community should be delving into the why of something instead of just this is how it should be. The get good mentality is you just saying this is how it should be. And the converse of that, I just like pressing 1 and running through the game. That is just saying this is how it should be, and not getting into why do you feel that this is how you wanted to play the game? Explain the reasoning behind you feeling that way. Why do you feel the community needs to improve, that they need to get good? And there was way too little of that kind of discussion and way too more of, and that's what happens when people vent and tempers flare. Conversations kind of boil down to just nothing.
Well, because if you had the motivation behind someone, like I project at you my frustration, right? And you're just defensive. But if you were to know the motivation behind that, right, that's where dialogue comes in. So it's like, for those of us who, I can just say, I'll just be brutally honest with you guys. I have always wanted the greater community of Guild Wars 2 to become more embracing of the end game or more challenging content. Always selfishly motivated. I don't mind saying so. And the reason is because I think that Guild Wars 2 has one of the best, probably the best combat systems around for endgame raiding. It is a wonderful experience for those of us who like to participate in it, but we have always been very aware that we are sort of lower on the totem pole in terms of priority for Arenanet. And I've never faulted them for that. I don't. From a business perspective, it makes total sense. Yeah. They know who their audience is. So that's why I've always been so frustrated with the endgame community who is gatekeeping the end game experience, right? If somebody new comes to your raid and is a newbie and doesn't know what they're doing, and you say STFU noob, GTFO, and you kick them from the group, do you think they're ever going to come back? They're going to tell all their friends, and they're going to have a terrible experience. We should be embracing people coming in and trying to welcome them into that game mode, which is why we try to do that every chance that we possibly got. And I know that the other side is very defensive of it as well. This game was incredibly casual, is incredibly casual. In terms of MMOs, this is probably the best iteration that has ever been made of the theme park MMO design, which is that there's a million different ways to play the game. They're all valid, and you get to choose what ride you want to ride, and you are not required to ride any ride that you don't want to ride. And that has been so successfully done from the dawn of Guild Wars 2. It's just a weird combination of a game that in reality, in performance, right, in the way that it's been implemented, does not expect you to capitalize on its combat system at all, and then also has a depth of combat that is so alluring to endgame meta players. So that it had that dichotomy.
And a combat system, not to interrupt you, and a combat system that is purely skill based, right? Like that is only judged on skill, nothing else.
Yes. Yeah, and that's so. Don't I always come back to itemization? It really, like, that is the real thing. And Azure, I see what you said. I haven't read the whole thing, but my guess is that there are super casual players in every MMO. What I think makes Guild Wars 2 sort of separate is what I mentioned before. Like, there is a vertical progression that really exists in a lot of games. It exists in Final Fantasy. It exists in World of Warcraft. It exists in ESO. For Guild Wars 2, it really kind of comes down to the fact that they, like, what causes every dynamic in this game is the fact that there's only horizontal progression and self-imposed goals, right? I want to look cool. I want that skin, but do I need it? I don't, right? If I don't want to do that content, that content is not going to give me anything that I don't already have. And so it really has made people find just the way that they want to play this game, right? Just that way. And the game's been out for 10 years. So these people have been finding just that way for a long time and found that they have no problem with that whatsoever. They've never been asked to do anything that they're uncomfortable with. They've never been asked to improve or change their playstyle in any way, shape, or form to get anything new that they want. Guild Wars 2, one of the amazing things that they do are these mounts. I'm not surprised that gating something that every player, regardless of playstyle, wants behind a playstyle that they have had 8 years worth of avoiding and being happy to avoid. I mean, you can see how we ran into this, right? I blame the turtle. I blame the turtle for the whole thing.
Well, it really is. It really, not to oversimplify, but a lot of this can really be boiled down to this turtle. Somebody in chat had mentioned it earlier, but why not allow the turtle to have been given upon entering the map, and then have a cool skin for the turtle locked behind the completion of the meta event? I think this entire
was that Azure that said that?
Yeah, possibly. I think that would have fixed kind of this whole thing.
It's a good idea.
It kind of would have worked, right? And then this would just be another meta event like previous ones that, yeah, they're hard, and it would be nice to throw some awesome rewards at the end of it so people have a reason to repeat them. It's just so everybody can get them.
Yeah.
That's the next big, really important part, actually.
So I would say that they don't even have to use the previous model, right? In my opinion, it's okay to come out with a new meta that is different from the other ones. It's okay if they're like, this meta is going to be really freaking hard. Like that's okay. Like there have been things that have been made for the very casual player base, for the PvP player base, and for the meta player base. It would be okay for them to come out with one that's different. The things that need to change, in my opinion, are that they should take away the turtle, like we talked about. I love the idea of giving a skin or something from behind the last thing. But somebody else had brought up the fact that continual repeating of this event is probably going to be pretty low. Even the way that things are now, or even afterwards, because the rewards are too short. They're all given at the end. They're only given if you succeed. It's 2 hours of a possibility of failure. And there's not big rewards along the way. And it's so challenging that 2 hours could be wasted and you get nothing. So I think that they should up, and just so you know, Phoenix did mention this earlier, and it is true. They have already said that they know that that's the case, that they're going to be increasing the rewards from the event. So that, we don't know how they're going to do it, and that'll be another coffee break for sure. But they do know that they're going to be doing that. So I think that they should implement it either periodically throughout the event. You get good rewards, so the people that are coming in late, or rather the people that came in early, are still getting good rewards. Even if you fail, it's still worth it in some way. And this is something that I heard from somebody else. Muckluck mentioned this in his channel, and said that he got it from someone else, but he couldn't remember who it was from. But I love the idea because it's very Guild Wars 2. What if just as any other event in Guild Wars 2, there is a participation reward, bronze, silver, and gold, or like the adventures that exist, bronze, silver, and gold. What if if you did it under the certain amount of time, like the amount of time that there is now, like we all kind of agreed, like the way that the meta is now, like if you had unlimited time, you could just keep throwing yourself at it and you would win, right? So like, what if this time gave you gold, and then you could get 2 more minutes for silver and then 2 more minutes for bronze, and there was some sort of really good reward locked behind gold.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what if there was a chalk infusion level, a
lottery drop?
A lottery drop. Yes. This would really increase incentive. So you could get rewards. You could get, they would still be worth it for people to do casually in sort of pickup groups, but it would still incentivize organized groups to come together to try to do this to score the gold. And it would still be worth it otherwise. I think that would be awesome and stay within the systems that Guild Wars 2 is already familiar with, which means it's more likely to be implementable. How do you guys feel about that?
No, I agree. I mean, I think those are definitely some of the changes that they need to make to fix this meta. I mean, we talked about the whirlpools. We talked about
Tom Selleck
changing the time. Maybe not that's the time that's necessary to be involved, but like you said, making the rewards better so the time that, because other metas are long too, making the rewards that are given out worthwhile for that time, spreading them out, and then having something unique at the end. I really like that idea that you're talking about here, of the gold, silver, bronze thing. I think that's a really good implementation, and it gives people it gives people more of a gap to complete the meta. And then they still could have, if they did it that way, they could have locked the siege turtle behind the meta.
Behind any level of completion.
Yeah,
right?
any level.
Yes.
So even if you did bronze, you got 4 extra minutes, right? That's 4 extra minutes. A lot of people would get the meta done.
A lot more people. People are failing by like 3 to 10 seconds. I mean, it's really close, right? Yep. So like 4 minutes, 6 more minutes, that would do it.
Yeah. And the rewards you get for bronze wouldn't be good, but you would get your turtle, and there you go. So I think those are really good solutions. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really sticks out to me.
Salesman?
I would also like 2 more things. One, I'd like the events to be more lane orientated. I don't like the running around like headless chickens.
Dragon says Anet running around like a headless chicken with this meta. We're running around in the meta. They're running around about the meta. It's tough.
Yeah. And then I would also like there to be less of a requirement to put together a raid composition with 50. Oh, we just lost Razbot.
Yes, we just lost Razbot.
No, hold on.
Uh-oh. Hello, anyone there? Hey, we're back.
There we go. Sorry, guys. At least we don't lose the audio now. We only lose the visual.
Yes, actually.
There we go.
Nice.
Awesome.
There we go. That happens, by the way, guys, because the streaming PC is watching these cameras from Roz, who sits in the channel with us, and so Roz isn't speaking. So eventually he AFKs.
What I forgot was that we can turn that off.
Yeah, we can.
Sorry, we forgot.
We're gonna do that. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna shave the mustache. Everything's gonna be better next week, guys.
People want you to keep the mustache, according to chat.
People are calling me Tom Selleck and saying that I need to be a used car salesman. I don't know how this is a positive thing.
Calling you Tom Selleck is not exactly a criticism, right? Wouldn't that be a compliment? No,
I mean, Tom Selleck had the sexiest mustache of the 80s.
True.
So, if you're going to say a mustache, that's the best one, I think.
I think you should keep the mustache. But anyway.
Oh my God. He told me when we saw each other just last week, and he said, the last thing he said was, Merrick, good to see you. Love you, buddy. We'll do this again soon. By the way, shave that mustache. The last thing he said to me before he left.
It's grown on me. It's grown on me.
Oh, yeah, it's grown on me, too.
No, I think that no, you can stop with that.
Oh, come on. You set that one right up for me to just knock out of the park.
I did. Well, tell me what you think. I think that it is it's going to be difficult moving forward. I think that it's fine now, but difficult moving forward, and maybe it's not fine now because it's also contributed to this divide, but it's going to be difficult moving forward to continue to build a raid squad with 50 people. So I don't know when you did this meta, America, how it was for you, but for me, me and Phoenix were looking for the meta. We hopped from map to map. Couldn't find one that looked like it was going to succeed. Couldn't find one that had to look like it was a good group. The ones that we did find that looked like they were going to be successful, or had the potential to be successful, had a join Discord requirement, and we didn't feel like doing that. We just wanted to chill and relax.
You joined because of the mustache?
We finally found one that didn't have a join Discord requirement, but it had literally every other requirement under the sun. You had to have a raid build, and you had to link it, and your gear was checked, and your build was checked. So you had to have raid gear. You also had to have some kind of proof of your experience in the game. They didn't say what that was. People were linking KP. I said all titles and shares. I'm not sure what Phoenix linked, but they were looking for that.
Is cauliflower acceptable?
It's probably cauliflower.
Okay.
And of course, when I said all titles and shares, I got pulled into the squad instantly, right? Like I linked my build, all titles and shares immediately.
Yep.
Is that commander going to take someone that links their open world build and has never done a raid or a strike or anything like that? I don't think so. No,
and you're right. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't explain like the internal struggle that I feel when I hear that. If I were to just be totally selfish, right? Just like completely block out, just for some reason just did the cross. If I were to just split the entirety of like needing to consider the greater good of the community, right? If I was just like a solo player, if I wasn't a streamer or somebody that really cared about the overall experience of the greater community and the success of the game, et cetera. Like I'm really invested in this game. I've been playing it for 10 years. I met my wife in this game. I care about it a lot. So I have got all these other things. But if I were to very selfishly be told by my good friend Cryptic, hey dude, you fellow raider, right? There's this new expansion that just came out. The meta event is 50 people. It's big and requires organization, and people are pinging DPS builds and KP because it requires that amount of structure. It's a zone-wide giant meta event for 50 people that's hard and requires organization. Do you think I'd be kicking down the door saying this sucks? How dare? I would be like, sign me up. I'm back in this game. If I was gone, that would have brought me back. Because that's exciting. So I get it, and I agree with you 100%. I think that for a lot of people in Guild Wars 2, that's going to feel really alienating. But if I had my perfect storm, if I had my perfect balance, and I'm not saying that I know how to get there, but if I had my perfect result, it would be that people could still fill these groups, get it done, and be able to accomplish whatever rewards that they need, maybe in a lesser degree, and that there's still incentive for those other groups that want to get some bigger, better reward or to have better success to actually still exist and require those things. I would love both. And this is why I think at the end of every raid argument or strike argument ever, it always comes down to difficulty levels. How many times have we talked about that? A story mode dungeon versus a CM dungeon and the several steps in between. That's what we've always wanted. CMs are nice in raids. And there was a lot of discussion this week about comparing it to CMs and things. I have a lot of feelings about that, but I would say that in general, having that level scale where you could be like, I'm completing it for story, right? I'm completing it for lesser rewards and lesser difficulty. And then I'm completing it in a more challenging way. Let's look at strikes. That's literally what strikes have become. That's what raids are becoming, because raids aren't going to be existing anymore. They're sort of funneled into strikes now, which end up being single boss. Mm-hmm. And they are super challenging versions of single player story content, right? For those of you guys who haven't done the strikes, there's 4 strikes and they're all things that you experience in the story, right? So this is just so you know, spoilers ahead for the next 30 seconds. It's going to be like Anka. You fight Anka in a strike, just like you did when you fought Anka in the story, or Mai Trin when you fight Mai Trin with what's her name? Tell me out here. Drawing a blank.
Even? Oh, Marjorie Delacroix.
No, I mean you fight her with Marjorie, but she summons Scarlet. So when you fight Scarlet,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So which is amazing, and it's such an awesome fight. And then when you fight Minister Lee on the rooftop, and then eventually Suwon and the giant event, all of these things are are basically like, here, you get to experience this story through the story super easy, right? In a very relaxed, story-driven, single-player way. And then I choose to do it again in a really much more difficult experience with 10 people and get real rewards from it, tangible, repeatable rewards to it that requires coordination and DPS and CC and all these things. Like, that is the balance that I think Arenanet is trying to strike now. I actually had a real issue with raids being shut down and then strikes going forward. I should say that since the last time we talked about this, that has changed. I actually don't feel bad about the loss of raids if strikes are going to be continuing this way. I feel like they're more connected to the story. I feel like the difficulty is still good. The guy who is making these things, I think it's the Fractal guy. He is a freaking champion, dude. Like the modern combat, endgame combat requirements are so much fun. He does such a good job. And then there's going to be CMs added to those. So there's going to be several levels of experiencing this content, which is very intrinsically attached to the story. I don't see why that can't be applied. Kill, I'm sorry. I tried to warn for spoilers. I don't see why that can't be applied to everything in this game, to open world, to meta events. Why not? Right? There's even, and no one's brought this up yet, but like Twisted Marionette, which has become sort of like a more challenging meta that requires a separate thing. Like there are avenues that this could take to appease both parties without needing to ruin it for one or the other.
Did you want to discuss how you feel like you would fix the community divide, or do you feel like that's a topic for another podcast? So I feel like we talked about how we would fix the meta event.
Yeah.
And I think surprisingly we were all on the same page here with the meta event.
I expected to be dueling with Cryptic on that. I thought for sure.
I was expecting us to have differing opinions there. But
my opinion has swayed so much on this. I went from this is why are they nerfing this? This is so dumb. I want more hardcore content. I mean, this isn't hardcore, but I want more difficult content in the game. All the way to they need to nerf this. This is terrible. This is a horrible idea. Why did they do this? To now I'm right in the middle. Like I see both sides. I feel empathy for both sides. I just think they nerfed it too quickly.
I agree. I definitely live on one side of this. I am I don't want to call myself a hardcore raider. I've done every raid thing that exists in this game 1,000 times over, right? And I am very experienced at every bit. I've got every achievement and everything, but I don't consider myself hardcore or tryhardy because I found a good way to have fun in this game by trying to make things that were less powerful or considered to be bad more viable. I found a way to experience endgame and have a good time by training other people and encouraging people to come in even if they aren't at the tip top of their game. So I don't consider myself on that side, but I'm definitely a raider, not a casual player. I spent the last year of playing this game never leaving the aerodrome, right? I'm definitely on one side, but I felt like this event was, like I said before, like a marriage of the two. Like I felt like I was being invited to go out into open world and have a shared experience with people who don't raid. And I would love for them to feel the same way on the other side of things. I don't want people, if you guys take one thing from this, please bring it out there into the world with you. Regardless of what side you're on in this debate, your opinion is valid. And so is the other guys. Everyone is playing this game and trying to share a common space. For those of you who maybe aren't raiders, the experience of raiding is really weird in this game because it has been very, very distinctly separate from the rest of the game. And most raiders feel as though they don't get enough content. There isn't enough focus on what they do. The last raid was years ago that was added. We don't get new content when new stuff comes out. So if people are really like, that's their game mode, they have a really hard time with it. So it makes sense to me from my perspective that they would be really appreciative of an opportunity to experience something that they can get behind outside of raids. But I want the person who has had this experience in Guild Wars 2 this whole time that they never wanted to raid and they never had to be expected to. I don't want them to have to do that kind of stuff either. But there's got to be an open dialogue. I don't know exactly how they would solve that, how they would get along, other than to change the way in which we deal with each other. Somebody said earlier that they really hate the labels, and I really hate them too. The filthy casual get good, or the toxic elitist thing, like that split doesn't have to be there. I think that there's a lot of overlap that we can try to do. And I think that that's Arenanet's goal. I think that's what we started this off with. The goal would be to sort of bring those disparate parties together and maybe ramp people up into being able to try different things outside of their comfort zone. I just want to give everyone a turtle, though. You know, everyone can have a turtle. It just doesn't. There shouldn't be something that they're locked away from.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas how people would get along? Like how you would solve this problem to encourage people to try new things?
Go ahead, June, if you have some, because I can
mean,
rant about this forever.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking based on like some of the things that are going on, speaking about in chat, that if the people who are maybe a little bit more skilled, that helps, right? If there's some people like that in a group. Now, what's the incentive though for those people to do a meta over and over again, and not win? Because that's really what we need, right? If the incentive is just when you win the meta, you get something that you need, that's just going to breed the elitist tendencies, right? Because these people are going to want to do this quickly, they're going to want to do it efficiently, and they're not going to want to deal with people that are learning. If you give some benefit for participating in the meta, even if it fails, then that starts fixing the problem. If you go a step further and you actually make the event itself enjoyable enough that people want to repeat it, I mean, that's like the ultimate, right? If you make the combat so much fun that people don't even care if they win, then you've just reached exactly what you need.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I agree with, incentivizing with rewards and incentivizing with enjoyable gameplay. I think we've kind of seen, maybe not on the reward side of that, but we've seen the enjoyable gameplay side of that in raids where skilled people will dedicate their time to teaching people that don't know what they're doing, all the training raids basically, right?
Yep.
And they will deal with failing. Oh, when you're trying to get someone Doom CM, right? And they're over and over and over and over.
Trying to get cryptic Doom CM. Yeah, I remember.
I was not the problem.
No, you weren't.
People are willing to dedicate their time in order to accomplish a goal for other people. I mean, we see Teapot do this. He does Doom like once a week, right? Like Doom takes people to Doom CM or Doom at least. So I think that as long as enough of each is provided, the community will exist to teach people challenging content. Hopefully there will always be people willing to do that. I think, and I've talked about this a bunch. I think we talked about like what needed to happen in order for the divide to be solved. Could it be at least shrunk some, right? And I think one of the first things that has to happen is that we have to stop trying to prove our point. People are in these discussions. I see it all the time when people are talking about this meta. They're going at this from their perspective and not trying to see the other side whatsoever.
Sounds like the internet.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. It is the internet in general. But I mean, this is our community, right? This is our game. This is the game we love, right? We have to be willing to put in the extra effort and go the extra mile for the other side of the argument, right? And I think this is especially even more so. I know this is tough, guys. I know I'm gonna talk to my rating people out there right now. Okay, I know this is tough.
I'm listening.
You got some more serious content. Arenanet looks like they're actually listening to you. They put serious content in the game. You want to protect that content. You want to show Arenanet that they made the right decision by doing this. And I know it's tough to take a step back from that. That is how I feel.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's how
you nailed it.
I think that's how Teapot Eyes. I think that's at the core of this. Whether they realize it or not, is that they want more of this kind of content, and they don't want to see it taken away from them, or they don't want Arenanet to have to admit internally or publicly that this isn't good for the game. So they want they're
for them to change it back too quickly before we get the opportunity to have it balance out.
Exactly. So they are trying their hardest to show people that this is good for the game, that we can do this, that this doesn't need to be nerfed. Because it is an extension of that would mean potentially more of this content, or an extension that would mean that Arenanet can see that the community can do this, you know? So I think that's really what's at the heart of this. And I know the passion behind it. I've been there myself, guys. I've been there myself. I know the passion behind this, but what we as, you know, the harder core side of the community are doing is asking someone. We're not changing what we're trying to make it more accessible for them, but we've always done that with raids, with strikes, with fractals. We've always tried to find ways to make this content more accessible.
Yep.
Well, you're right. Some of us.
Well, I only say that because it's a pretty common thing. You hear people all the time, like, I try to get into raids, but it's so toxic. People are not welcoming. I mean,
that's true.
So it's always dependent on how you get into raids, right? Like the method in which you do that. If you try to get into raids and you're not in a positive learning experience environment, it's going to be really negative.
I have something off of that. How many people do you think have been, you know, kind of burned with that experience with a pug group in the past, where now not only do we have to be really people have to be really understanding and encouraging, but we also have to fight 7-8 years of pug groups giving a casual player a bad taste in their mouth. So now we have to not just be welcoming, but you have to like be extremely on the other side. Like you have to go to extreme level to combat all of that experience.
I think a lot
definitely. There's a lot of baggage, right? This divide has existed for a long time. People feel that way a lot. And that's the other thing about raiding, I think, that it's weirdly distilled. When you take an environment of raids and don't give them a lot of content, right? And there isn't a vertical progression. I keep going back to this because it really defines this environment. It really does. There's no vertical progression in raids or in gear. What that ends up doing is when you walk into raids, right, there's not like a beginner entry level raid and then a max level, high level raid that you're not going to get to for a long time. By the time you get to Doom, you had to do everything else really strongly, which was ramping up in difficulty and expectation as you go. That doesn't exist in Guild Wars 2. So what you do is you walk into raids for the first time, right? You're a casual Guild Wars 2 player and you're like, you know what? It's finally time. I want to raid. You walk into the aerodrome, you join a group, and you are now in the same group. You, as some guy who's never raided before, is in the same group with a guy who has just been doing the same content over and over and over and over again 1 million times because there's no progression. So you're with the try-hardiest guy ever and the newbiest guy ever at the same time. There isn't a ladder. And that exists in normal games. It does. In Guild Wars 2, it doesn't. And so there is a clash of mentalities that happens a lot in this game between that. So you really have to seek out a positive environment to get into this stuff. And so a lot of people aren't going to do that. They don't know how to do that. They ran into a really negative experience. They had a bad time. And then they go and they post on Reddit and they're like, Guild Wars 2 raiders are toxic. And then everyone kind of builds that mentality and they get afraid of it. And yeah, I mean, if you're asking if I think that there's an influence based on 8 years of baggage that people have because of negative experiences, I think the answer is yes.
So let me ask you another question, though. Do you feel like, and this is addressing what Phoenix said in chat, do you feel like it is okay for a meta event to basically require 50 people to be raiders?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Okay. Should it have the turtle behind it? No. Should a meta event require raider type level experience? Yeah, there's no reason not to have that.
I think it's okay. I think, will it make everyone happy? No. There's a lot of content that comes out that raiders roll their eyes at, right? Mm-hmm. That's not for them and they're not going to have as much fun. They can try it, maybe do it once, not have a great time. Is it something that's acceptable for them to do that? I think yes. On a design balance perspective, would I say requires 50 raiders? No, I would say maybe it requires 30 raiders, even though there's 50 people. No, and you're right. And that's what I'm saying, right? If there were 30 raiders and 20 very casual players, it would still succeed. The truth is that it does require more than any other meta has before, and I think that's okay. I do really believe that it's the gate that is the problem, and the gate is the turtle. I also want to highlight something that Kill said a second ago, which I loved. He said that his guild let's see. I love the EOD meta, he says. My World v World guild is actually organizing it. Imagine that. World v World guilds organizing something in PvE, and we meet other server guilds making friends, etc. I love the meta. I think there's got to be room for that kind of experience, right? Like, we're looking at it from the PvE raider perspective, right? Oh, you're a she. I'm so sorry. So what she said, I think, is really valid. We're looking at it from a raider perspective. We end up going into the meta and saying, hey, this is something that we can sort of relate to when we normally wouldn't be able to. But the World v World perspective, I mean, that's freaking cool. I've not known that. And I could see that being a really awesome experience also. They're more used to coordinating 50 people, right? That's got to be more relatable to them than I would have given credit for it, right? Like that, like maybe we are like the DPS rotation guys and whatever, but they know CC and they know group coordination up to 50 people. So you wouldn't have thought that, but isn't that fascinating? Like, I'm not a World v Worlder, so I didn't look at that perspective, but yes. Kill, thank you for sharing that perspective.
And I do think your solution of the bronze, silver, gold thing actually kind of solves this as well, right? Like, if people don't have the DPS because they're bringing their open world builds, then they just get bronze, right? And if they have the DPS and they put together 30 raiders, then they get gold. So I think that solves that. As far as going back to like solving the community divide, I mean, that's a long topic with a lot of things that have to happen for that to be resolved. To finish off the point I was saying, I want people to try to see the other side as much as possible. We have to be empathetic to a change that has happened. This is a change. Nobody likes change, right? This is a change in Guild Wars where
change is hard.
Change is hard. This is a change in Guild Wars where we now have open world content with something that, well, it was not anymore, but or won't be on the 15th, but with something that people want that's gated behind it. Okay, we haven't really had that before, where there is something that's core to the way you experience the game being gated behind it, not just the skin, not just the special thing. Being able to see the other side's perspective from that and empathizing with that, and trying to reach, I've seen too much of getting stuck on their perspective and not wanting to go the extra 50% over. You have to meet them in the middle, right? You have to go that far. And that's where we start as far as resolving the divide. Beyond that is going to be way more. I mean, Arenanet would have to do more of this kind of content for this to become more of a consistent thing. I think communities would have to start communicating with each other on a more consistent basis instead of being isolated. And no, that does not mean everybody joins one community. Everybody's allowed to have their own community. Just, we need more communication between communities and Arenanet with what they're looking for out of the game and how the community tackles that new content. But yeah, I mean, those are just my surface level. Like, I could go on and on. This is a whole other podcast topic, probably.
Yeah, it's social interaction and social political dynamics within a player base of a video game. That's a fascinating thing, no matter what. Every different MMO has a different style of community. I think they're like the way that the communities work, and I think Guild Wars 2 has its own problems for sure. Guild Wars 2 has an amazing community. I know that firsthand. But like I said, I think it comes down to that divide that has always existed there between the game modes when you have such a theme park MMO in that way, that there's World v World players who don't ever want to leave. There's PvEers who roll their eyes and get so mad every time they're crafting a legendary weapon because they have to go and do World v World to do the Gift of Battle, right? Like, there's these big divides that split people.
It's true.
Yeah, Junie's one of them. She hates having to do World v World.
I'm thinking about the fact that I still don't have the War Claw.
Oh, me neither.
Oh, I don't either. So next coffee break, we need a World v World guest, obviously, to represent the World v World perspective. I did want to talk to Flying Triangle. Said this was probably mentioned, but maybe they could have a CM mode that you could instance into with rare and unique rewards attached to it. And we didn't say that exactly, but I think that is basically what we all agree on, that there should be different ways to experience something. I really like the idea of normal raid and then CM raid. I really like the idea of strikes, which are in essence going to serve as a 3-step thing, right? There's one in the story that you get to experience just for the story. It's literally in the story, right? You're going to fight Mitrin, right, in the story. But then you could do it in a strike to get better rewards. And then there will be a CM for people that really want to push it. I think these are really good things. I think that the way that we sort of landed with the meta would be that as long as there's rewards throughout, and not something so essential like a turtle or a mount locked behind its completion, and or that they made several steps along the way to maybe a bronze, silver, and gold success for the event, yielding different rewards for people to maybe aspire to do well every time. But even if they don't manage to make it, that it isn't a pointless experience, right? Or you're extra rewarded for that level of coordination and CC and DPS. If you manage to get a really good team together, it's an exciting thing. You can be rewarded for that. It's not going to feel like a giant letdown. You see, right now, that's what it is. It's 2 hours of investment for the potential of a giant letdown at the end. I think it would be, if we could shift the dynamic to be, you get what you needed from a lesser completion, and then there's an extra level of possible excitement and enthusiasm of, oh my gosh, we're actually going to do this great thing. Like, I didn't need it, but there's this great extra reward that I could get based on the fact that we had a really good group, or based on the fact that I worked my butt off, right? I mean, like, that's what you want. You want to feel like if you go to an event, and this is my personal experience, because as a raider, you guys who raid, you can probably relate to this. If you go to an open world meta event like Dragon Stand or Chalk Garant or whatever, and you are in a real raid build and you have brought CC and you understand the mechanics, you've looked ahead, you know what to do. When you go to an event, you make a big difference at that event. You're worth a few players, and that's cool. That incentivizes, you know, the casual players that are not really wanting to do that. They don't need to know that that's happening. They don't have ARC DPS. They're not seeing that. They don't care. But for the raiders that show up, I love going and being like, oh man, you know, the middle lane is failing. Like, I will go to the middle lane and I'll drag Cryptic with me, you know, and we'll like kick butt in the middle lane and make a big difference, right? Like, and then you can walk away thinking, you know, maybe this would have failed if we weren't here. And that's a really cool experience to get to share with other people. And when you make it to a Dragon Stand that really low mans it and you win, that feels like $1 million. And if they could like convert that to, hey, I'm going to drag a few of my friends here and let's see if we can get the gold on this to get the extra thing, and then maybe drop an infusion, you know what I mean? Something cool and replayable incentive to do this. To put that effort in, and then look at the meters and go, you know, like for the casuals, they're going to get everything that they want, but for the raiders, I can point to Cryptic and go, dude, you killed it on the CC, right? Or like that boss over there would have died. Sorry, me CC, Cryptic DPS. So like you did so much more damage than the average stack there, or they were low manning it, and so we threw a giant DPS over there, and it made a big difference. This is how you share mutually fun experience from disparate groups that play the game very differently. And the fact is, whether people are aware of that split or not, a lot of the meta events that exist in this game already allow room for that experience. I have gone to, I remember when I first learned P-Chrono and I was kicking butt at that thing, or when Rifle Deadeye was first like super strong in OP, I would go to a meta event and like kick butt, man. Like, you look at the DPS meters and you're like, holy crap. And that experience is fun. I don't think that's a negative thing.
No, I agree completely. And I think what you're doing here is you are, with all these changes and suggestions that you're making, you are building the ramp, right? Like I said in Teapot's video, you know, he's got this graph with this ramp, and you know, you got strikes take this much to get to this difficulty, and raids are even more. And
sure.
You know, Dragon's End is supposed to be the ramp to get you up there. I feel like there's still a bit of a jump for Dragon's End, right? There's still just a little bit of a jump, and I don't think nerfing it is the solution to make. We talked about this. I don't think nerfing is the solution to make that a ramp, because then it won't go up high enough, right? What you're saying, it needs to still get you high enough that you can then.
You want steps in between.
Exactly. We need steps in between, and all the things that we've talked about with the gold, silver, bronze, everything that we've talked about in this discussion are ways that we can make that happen. And hofully, I mean, I don't know if Arenanet's listening to this conversation, but hopefully they're listening to the discussion as a whole. And I know
probably not. Hi, Arenanet, if you are.
Darkbringer's probably listening.
Darkbringer, where are you at, man?
Yeah, I think that, you know, hopefully Arena's listening to the discussion as a whole, and hopefully, because I know the hardcore community is this minority group. I'm hoping that they're listening to both sides. Hoping they're doing what I'm telling the community to do, which is listen to both sides, take empathy for both sides, and hopefully they're working on solutions that are good for both sides. Because that's what we need. We don't want to see this kind of content go away, but we also don't want people to be coming in and just wanting, they just want to play their game and have fun and feel like they're locked out from something that they want, or, even just an event that they want to enjoy,
Yeah, we don't want to gatekeep any experience from anyone. I think that's the greatest strength of Guild Wars 2. There's so many ways to play this game, and it is for you, however you want to do it. I think that as a raider, I'm just looking for experiences where I can find that sweet spot, like maybe, and for those of you guys who don't know, the raid community got really scared when EOD came out.
Yeah.
They did. Like, they basically told us, no more raids. Not going to happen. It's going to be strikes instead. And we've already not seen a raid wing for a very, very long time. And so the raid community has been grumpy. And then you get
spoons on top of that.
Yes. Oh, and it's a time of great flux for the entire game, right? Well, Killian is talking about World v World, and I'm sure it's just as big there. But definitely, like, we are in like this crazy time, and we thought, strikes thus far have not been what we wanted them to be. We wanted them to be more like raids, getting to a better level of difficulty. Right now, even the challenging ones are kind of cheesed. So it really isn't quite what we want. So we didn't know how strikes were going to pan out. And we were basically told that our game mode was going to stop getting support. So there's been concern, but I agree. I think there's a lot of ways that we can bring this together, sort of share a mutual experience with people. Killian says, Merrick TV, I think what's different in the POV between Raiders and World v World Fighters, we usually don't show arc DPS damage. We show tag distance. Yeah. So I mean, again, I think that's one of the coolest things, that there's World v World players that are coming in and experiencing this from the other side. But I don't know. My hope is, just to wrap up, I think we know that Arenanet is removing the turtle from the meta event. So for those of you who are worried about it, it's going to be purchasable by map currency. So you will not need that. And also the rewards are going to be reworked in some sort of positive way. So there should be more incentive to do it. And hopefully going forward in the next week, my hope is that that's enough, right? Maybe we come back to this in a week and see if World v World Commander Merrick TV. No, did you guys ever see that happen? That was like a stream reward at some point, and I had to World v World, and it was awful. It was so bad. I was just getting lost and like running around by myself and totally lost. I had a couple of 1v1s that were okay, but I kept losing my commander. It was a sad day for Merrick TV.
You'll be the commander this time, though.
Wait, no. What am I going to do there? All right, guys, everyone follow the commander into the aerodrome. Sorry, into Dragon's End, where we can both play together. Maybe.
Yeah, we should do
look for that.
Specs, and we should do elite specs and like story spoilers or something.
Yeah, since this one was
good.
taken up entirely.
Good, yeah.
We'll do EOD part 3.
Part
3.
Okay, guys, so we're probably going to have to wrap it up here. I know it's tough. We can talk about this stuff forever. This is absolutely our favorite thing to do. We made this podcast because this is what Cryptic and I do all the time. We just sort of, in fact, last night we got mad at each other because we ended up in Discord with some friends and had a full-on coffee break not streamed. And we kept having to say, well, I shouldn't say more about this because I should save this for a coffee break, but then we would do it anyway. So I'm really glad that you guys enjoy this. We do this every single Friday. Also want to give a huge shout out to the rest of our Ko-fi subscribers. No Point Origin, you're an absolute legend, dude. We got Zang, we got Art, in fact. You guys are awesome. Such great people. Of course, Dalindra, our newest, and I really, really want to give it. What? And Angie, of course, dude. Angie, who's been such a great subscriber for a long time. Maddox, the absolute legend. And of course, I want to shout out our good friend, Andushan, who was responsible for situating my audio in the great way that it was working today. I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's been much better than it's ever been. So Andushan, love you, dude. Really appreciate it. Again, check Twitter because that's where we post when we're going to do the podcast. And I hope we see you guys next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.